spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call ended. Yeah. He was at Mar-a-Lago. We were having dinner talking about it. I said, you have to close up your borders because they're coming in the northern border too a lot. Not like the southern border, but they're coming in the Canadian border a lot.
President-elect Donald Trump raising concerns there about the Canada-U.S. border in an interview that aired on NBC's Meet the Press this morning. He also said he wants to deport all illegal immigrants in the U.S. during his 4-year term. It comes, of course, as he threatens tariffs on products from Canada and Mexico unless, he says, there is some tightening of border security. So what are the challenges that come with policing our shared border? Earlier, I spoke to Ken Cuccinelli. He served as Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security during the first Trump administration. He was also Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and I asked him how our shared border can be better enforced and what Trump's deportation plan might look like. Ken Cuccinelli, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So obviously the focus up here the past 2 weeks or so has been this threat of 25% tariffs on this country and from Mexico unless there is a move to curb what the president-elect says is illegal migrants and the flow of drugs. What do you make of how serious this threat is given those two issues that Trump pointed to?
Well, particularly given the issues he pointed to, I think it's very serious. And I think one of the things that people around the world know about Donald Trump is that he will follow through with things like this. So, but he'll also have discussion along the way. And, that was clear when Trudeau went and visited Mar-a-Lago. That seemed as cordial as it could be under the circumstances. While most people focus on the southern border in the U.S., the reality is, as I'm sure you know, the crossings on the northern border on a percentage basis have gone up even faster.
Yeah.
And it's in many ways a more difficult border to police. And just speaking as an American, we don't really appreciate how easy it is for people to wander on in with any, including very bad backgrounds, into Canada, and then traipse across the U.S. border. Now, Mexico has the same problem, but Canada does not have that problem. And I think that'll be a core focus for discussions between the two countries as it relates to border security.
Yeah, much, as you say, much longer border to patrol and secure. It doesn't sound like the president-elect gave Justin Trudeau sort of a checklist of changes he wants to see at the border. Obviously, we've heard from our side that they are thinking of various things. What do you think could be done to secure that longest, largely unprotected border?
So first of all, I wouldn't expect the president to give the prime minister a checklist. He has national level goals, and he expects people, for example, in the Department of Homeland Security and the Border Patrol to lay out the implementation of those goals. And our Department of Homeland Security leadership talking to the RCMP, those folks, that's where I think those discussions will take place substantively. And I do think that cutting down crossings in the areas we're seeing them go up, like in the northeast of the U.S., will be an important factor. And that may actually mean some reconfiguration of that border. In terms of making stopping those flows easier for both you all in Canada and for us in the U.S. I think there is definitely a goal of partnership here. We know from our experience with Mexico in 2019, for example, partnership works best. And in stopping these flows. It is a tough border in terms of securing the whole thing. But the goal isn't necessarily zero illegal crossings, as much as everybody might prefer that. But it's to drive them down to the point where it's not worth people trying to, for example, come to Canada as a way to get into the United States.
Right, where it's more manageable. I want to talk a little bit about the president-elect's deportation operation, because I think that there is, some concern in Canada that could actually force an increased flow into this country. What do you expect that it will look like, and how will it look different from deportation plans we've seen from Democratic presidents as well?
Sure. So the reality is, in recent history, I think President Obama probably deported more people than anybody else,
Yeah.
unless you count COVID turnbacks, in which case I imagine both the Trump and Biden administrations probably passed President Obama's. But deportation from within the country is challenging. You have to find people. You have to have the legal materials prepared to return them to their home country, and then you have to have the logistics in place to do that. That's if you do it the old way. If, for example, there isn't cooperation in the direction of Mexico, it's entirely plausible that the U.S. could just take people they identify as here illegally and put them on the Mexican side of the border. Because that's easier for the United States. And by and large, Mexico let most of them in here in the first place and frankly accommodated that.
Do you think, though, that when you hear people talking about the plan, it would be raids in businesses, in workplace, that, there's talk of breaking up families? Is that a real thing that you think is possible?
So first of all, there is not talk of breaking up families in the Trump administration. There is talk of deporting everybody who's here illegally, and families who have legal members can decide whether those legal members will stay here or go home with the rest of the family. That will be a decision of the family, not of the U.S. government. So, that's where that is going to reside. And I'd ask you to set aside that false narrative right now and forevermore, because that is not accurate. I do expect workplace raids. We only really had one large one in the first Trump administration. It was Mississippi chicken plants in 2019. I want to say there were around 650 arrests, plus corporate executives were charged. That's an important element of what I think you can expect to see happen in the second Trump administration, is that Americans participating in this will be charged with crimes, and that workplace enforcement will take place, and those people will be detained and deported. And I fully expect ICE is the agency that does the deportations, will go to their home. And if there are other people here illegally living with those folks they have arrested, they will also be deported. And I don't expect to see large scale exclusions from deportation as goes on, for example, under the Biden administration. That does not mean, well, let me put it in the positive. It will still be a priority to deport criminal illegals, people who've committed other crimes here. It will still be a priority to deport the 1.3 or 1.4 million people who have final orders of removal already in place. Those are going to be priorities. But I do not expect that means that no one else will be put into the deportation process.
I take your point about the families being separated. You're quite right. It's the family member that decides. The net result would be the same, though, right? If you're forcing out part of the family who isn't there legally, and you're leaving the person who is there legally behind, the family gets separated. But I'd love to get your perspective on Tom Homan, just in terms of what you would expect his approach might be. I don't know if you know him, but how he will take on this role.
I do know him. I think he's a great match for President Trump in the White House. He's got similar level of determination, but he also has street level experience as an ICE agent, all the way up to being the director of ICE. So he has done the work necessary to remove people from this country. He's been part of that process. Having a real world perspective in the White House is very helpful. You do not run operations out of the White House. Tom Homan will not be running operations. He will be coordinating the other agencies. For example, to have a well-executed immigration policy, the Department of Defense, of Health and Human Services, of Interior, the Department of State, all of these have roles to play. And the Department of Homeland Security can't make any of them cooperate, but the White House can. And that's where Tom Homan sits. And I expect that he is going to play the role of coordinating all of the pieces across the U.S. government that are necessary to smoothly and efficiently expand to a massive level the deportation effort of the U.S. government.
Ken Cuccinelli, really appreciate your expertise in this. Thank you, sir.
Good to be with you.